recognize Ranking Member Lucas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Jacobs, let's talk for a moment more about the spectrum issue, and at the conclusion, I'd like to offer an observation or two about the budget process. And question to you, sir, while we wait for the public release of the NOAA-NASA study, can you explain the process you used to validate the study?
So typically, we would take these algorithms, we would use a baseline set of assumptions, first testing things that are known quantities and reproducing outputs that are known. That's how we actually verify the code. The actual subject matter experts, this was validated with NOAA subject matter experts. It was concurred with the Navy, and then most importantly, validated by the subject matter experts in NASA. And this is an agency that sent a man to the moon 50 years ago using calculators. So I would certainly trust their input. But just to convince myself, I actually got a copy of the MATLAB code myself. And I can tell you it's fairly straightforward. You don't even need to compile it. You just have to have MATLAB and the right toolboxes.
So you don't even need a slide rule to do that.
Or an abacus.
Thank you. Dr. Jacobs, also, would you describe the time frame of NOAA's interaction with the FCC leading up to the March spectrum auction?
So we had assembled subject matter experts from NOAA, NASA, and the FCC as far back as 2017, going back and forth on the studies. There was an original study. There was a lot of questions about the assumptions that went into the software, which was a prepackaged software, which was relatively black box. You couldn't look at the source code to determine anything from it. So the FCC requested that we reconduct a study with code that you could actually see, and you could actually change the input parameters, which was a valid request. So we redid that. That began, I believe, somewhere last fall, November, December timeframe. Then we had the shutdown. On the heels of the shutdown, we reconvened, and at that point had output and have been going back and forth with the FCC ever since, where their subject matter experts are proposing new assumptions or questioning the inputs, and then we rerun the study with those inputs and come back with the results, and we're still sort of stuck in that do loop, so to speak.
The public would call it running the timeout, so to speak.
Well, we haven't seen anything that has been proposed by the FCC as far as assumptions that have changed the results of the study thus far.
So you're comfortable in saying that NOAA's dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's in preparing this information?
I'm confident that the study is acceptable.
Thank you, Doctor. And let me touch, for the benefit of my colleagues, a little bit on the budgeting process. Having been around a little while, I've discovered that generally when an executive budget comes down, the only thing that's ever recognized by people is when on the rare occasion an administration asks for additional spending, then we tend to respond to that in Congress. That was a weak attempt at humor, but a factual statement nonetheless. Typically, presidential budgets, executive budgets, are something that are required in the 1974 Budget Act and are examined and set aside. The 74 Budget Act gives the United States House, the United States Senate, the responsibility, yes, to look at the president's executive budget, but to craft our own and to reconcile that final document and use that as the product for the appropriation process to move forward. While we have an executive budget that many of us find fascinating, I think the focus of this body should be, how do we persuade our friends on the Budget Committee to do their work so that we'll have a real document that the appropriators can move forward with and fulfill all the responsibilities of the 1974 Budget Act. So while I, like many members, have typically been underwhelmed by the executive branch budget, whichever administration offered it up, the real onus is on us to do our work. And we should try harder to do our work and fulfill our responsibilities. With that, I